Alright, so recently something that's been coming up a lot, or seemingly a lot, is when we're talking about all the sort of different parts of the horror genre, the one that I'm kind of the most tired of probably at this point would be the Possession movie, which is obviously has a lot of greatness in its past, but a lot of the more recent ones have been very, and it's almost like a go-to for like these horror directors that are either just starting out or doing these really just low budget bullshit. And I thought we should go ahead and talk about what I probably consider two of my favorite in the possession area with Night of the Demons and Hello Mary Lou Prom Night 2, which typically I just refer to as Hello Mary Lou because of the whole. It's not. I mean, it's obviously we've got the same high school, and I think there's like one recurring character throughout them, but the fact that the whole Prom Night 2 thing was just kind of a marketing thing. With it actually starting off as a movie called The Haunting of Hamilton High, I think. And as you can see, while I do have the very nice Scream Factory Blu-ray of Night of the Demons, Hello Mary Lou has not had as great of a physical release. There is, I'm pretty sure it's out there individually, but as far as I know, it does not have a Blu-ray release that I'm aware of, and it can mostly be found in this 10 horror pack, this kind of thing that you can just find for like $3 at some, Big Lots or Walmart or something. And as you can see, it's not only is the Prom Night 2 title kind of gonna put that whole almost like a straight to DVD feel to it, even though it was a theatrical movie. But it's like stuck in here. Obviously, the first Prom Night is in here, and the Howling 4. But then there's all this other stuff, the stuff that you find in a lot of these that are like almost literally something that was shot in somebody's backyard, and you have no idea how it possibly got a physical release, let alone along the lines of something like, being in a pack with like the original Prom Night and Hello Mary Lou. And I'm not a fan of the first. Like, I talk about how much I love the slasher genre, how much I wish it could have a really big comeback. Of all the slasher movies out there, the original Prom Night is just one that doesn't do it for me. I just think it's so fucking boring. When you compare it to all the other slashers, I don't know. But yeah, so needless to say, I wasn't that excited to track down a movie called Prom Night 2 that was supposedly going in the possession area. But lo and behold, once I did, it wasn't what I was expecting in the best way possible. And I think we'll just go ahead and talk about Hello Mary Lou and then work our way over to Night of the Demons. So with all that said about this one, I suppose the one thing this one does have is at least it's in the widescreen format, so it's in somewhat of decent, like it's in better condition than you would think as far as being in one of these, horror packs where everything, like the quality's just really low, like it's gone from, place to place, and then the quality just gets lower and lower the more it goes. It's in decent condition on this thing. Like it's intelligent. You can tell everything that's here. So there is that, but it does need a better physical release at some point. So opening it immediately has the feel of a movie that might be smarter and more fun than it might seem when we meet the title character with Mary Lou, who is this almost sort of like Heather Chandler type, who leads quite literally the most sinful life she possibly can, which is great. It's one of those cases where it's like this very famous scene where she goes to the confessional and she talks about all the bad things she's done and how she loved all of it. And it's like, well, that's good. That's actually quite empowering, if anything else. Where it's like, good for her for going after whatever the hell she wants to do. The trouble with that is that Mary Lou is also an incredibly malicious character, to put it mildly, when she's doing all this, and she doesn't really give much of a fuck about the way other people or any sort of feeling to anybody else, and this has a negative impact on our character that will ultimately be Michael Ironside. And you can tell plain as day that this guy is meant to be a young Michael. I think this is there's another project I think after this where the same actor played a young version of Michael Ironside in another movie or TV show or something. And yeah, so as far as getting this opening, it is kind of like it's basically a reverse Carrie situation. This very, very memorable opening scene where, as usual in movies like this, and I believe it's the way the first movie started also, it's always a prank that goes wrong, where Mary Lou's malicious nature kind of comes back to bite her, and so her dude wants to get a little revenge on her by dropping a stink bomb behind her, but lo and behold, the stink bomb sets her on fire and kills her in front of the whole school. And then naturally, we know that some sort of second revenge angle of this is going to happen, only probably in the supernatural part. So that pretty much makes our lead character, I think Vicky is her name, this innocent who is going to be not so innocent as the movie continues to go on, and that's kind of the one of the more fascinating aspects of this movie is watching this character and how she's able to sort of surprisingly seamlessly change as we kind of watch her go from the complete opposite of somebody like Mary Lou to obviously literally being possessed by her and being overtaken by that. And the ways in which we see this character change, where it's like the first one we really get, I think, is when she says, like, somebody's talking to her and she says, "Shut your fucking mouth," in a way that we would never expect this character to. Because we see this upbringing that she has that seems very strict. She's definitely got a mother that's not emotionally there. And it's really funny when you think about this and how it's almost like this character's coming from a dramatic place with her family and how they interact. It feels like a lot of the characters in this movie, despite the movie's very horror in nature, are introduced through comedic moments or comedic bits in some way. Like with her parents specifically, you can already get the sense of the one that she has a relationship with and the one she's more distanced with by the fact that she calls her dad daddy, but her mom mother. And it's like just little details like that are the kind of details you don't expect in a movie called Prom Night 2. I'm trying not to make that a recurring thing of this is so much better than a movie called Prom Night 2 probably should be, or that you would expect it to be. Which is why I just stick with Hello Mary Lou when I'm talking about it. But yeah, moments like that really illustrate the characters well without having to do too much as far as like exposition or anything like that. And that kind of continues when we see some of the other characters. Like, there's the character that's the one that's like kind of desired in this somewhat Mary Lou kind of way. Maybe not to that extreme, but she's the kind of character where when a character approaches her, a guy approaches her, she says, "Get lost, asshole," and then turns to her friend and says, "I wonder why no guys want to go out with me." And it's little beats like that like they're nice comedic beats, but they tell us everything we need to know about the characters, which is something you don't typically get, I think, in movies that are kind of going in this direction. Like I said, the slasher movie is surprisingly known for how much it builds up its characters before they all start getting picked off. Like I said, with a movie like this, especially one that's supposedly a sequel to a slasher movie, you it kind of sneaks up on you like this whole movie does. And like I said, we've got plenty of character development with our principal Michael Ironside, but we've also got this character keeps popping in and out with the priest that we see at the beginning and then becomes a recurring character. And I love the kind of running joke that it feels like there's multiple scenes where somebody will be around this priest or talking to this priest directly, and the word "goddamn" will be said at some point, which has to be intentional. So yeah, it's really surprising how the writing in this is actually kind of up to par with a lot more of the decent and more almost kind of self-aware horror movies that we've seen. And what's really funny about that is we were talking about how all these characters are introduced with comedic beats. There is one character that kind of comes off tragic from the get-go. And you would think with that kind of, backstory forming and the way they're approached in this serious manner, they'd be somebody, like, usually the comedic characters are the ones that are going to go first in this kind of scenario. But, like, the one character that's, like, really got a lot of drama behind her ends up being the first one killed once everything takes off. And as I said, the way it's actually kind of taking these moments and sort of turning them in these sort of unexpected ways is... Yeah, it's like I'm almost afraid that this movie's kind of been dismissed because not only is it just plastered with the title and kind of damned with the title Prom Night 2. But the fact that you can just find it, associated with all these other shitty movies that are in these packs like this. Sometimes these the first time I saw Carnival of Souls was in one of these, so they can really sneak in. The trouble is you can sometimes, in order to find stuff like this, you got to watch all the shit and dig underneath it, and then you might find something good underneath. But there's a lot of shit to dig through. But I do think this one is worthwhile. And talking about some of the other things that it does, as far as like doing the kind of unexpected, is its approach to the whole possession genre and its whole, like, the whole portrayal of it, and how when we see these scenes like these nightmarish images of like the cafeteria and the school, and how they look like they're in this sort of like twisted afterlife, or in this sort of like they're sort of on hell or something, and it almost gives you like this. I don't think anything is like really explicitly said, but it's always given me the vibe of like that whole thing where when you're possessed, it's the person that's originally in the body that's being possessed has to go somewhere, while the spirit or whatever has control of their body. And I feel like these scenes of like when we're seeing like the nightmarish looking school or the cafeteria or whatever is like this is the place that the person goes once they're possessed. And that's kind of a terrifying thought, and it's not something that's really been tackled much in the possession genre. This is also just me kind of making my own conclusions, more or less, but that's the vibe I get to what I felt like they were going for with those. But also just kind of taking us to the sort of hell in general, but giving us like the point of view of the possessed, is something that I feel like you don't really see very often. And then the whole idea of her basically, like the makeup even, just totally starts to embody Mary Lou, and we can actually see the actress transform. The actress whose name I've been like really trying to remember. I want to say Wendy Lyon. I hope that's right. It's somewhere in that vicinity. But what's really great about this movie also, that we'll very much talk about with Night of the Demons as well, is some of the really great horror movies have those moments where we do get a lot of build-up, and we might get, an early kill here and there. But the really special ones, or like a lot of the really special ones, have those moments pretty much right in the center when you can tell that they reach a certain point where they just start really, really embracing crazy. And I think the moment in Hello Mary Lou where they just seem to fully embrace crazy and really jump into that's pretty much right about at the halfway mark, is the horse. The demonic rocking horse with the giant tongue, is something that is so incredibly wild. And like I said, when you're just expecting some sort of, knockoff, low-budget, unrelated sequel, your expectations get low. And when your expectations are that low and something as crazy as the demonic rocking horse happens, it's pretty spectacular. It's really spectacular when something like that can actually catch you off guard. Like it's even in a movie that would have been like on that level of crazy the whole time, the rocking horse would still be pretty wild. But that's the moment where I felt like they like really embraced it. And then we get stuff later where like when she starts making out with her dad, and for some reason her dad seems into it. But after we've seen the rocking horse, it's like, yeah, this is the level of crazy I'm ready for at this point. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. That can make it sound like it's almost kind of, takes the punch out of it and takes the shock factor out of it. But no, just the fact that you can get into that, and it gets into your mind to the point where you're like, I'm ready for anything this movie throws at me. That's when I feel like you're in a good place. Where it's like even if things might not catch you as off guard, once you've accepted where you are and the directions the movie's going to take you, it's this really almost welcoming feeling, like this almost kind of warm feeling. If you're like a really into horror, you're a real horror fan, that's really that's the feeling that you want, is to almost be welcomed by craziness. Which is what I feel like this movie accomplishes. It's also got some really nice and memorable set pieces just individually, like the chalkboard scene where she's sucked into it, and you can see what the effect is, but it's still this really cool scene, and the whole setup itself. And then we have the locker room scene with its particularly iconic kill. And not only is it iconic for the kill, but also the prolonged nude scene. And that's something I also... Like, they touch on this a little bit in Night of the Demons, but Hail Mary Lou just really goes all in on it. What both these movies do is have the innocent character, the one that would be, considered the final girl in, today's tropes and leading forward, and, like, as far as the slasher genre goes. Which obviously isn't the same as Possession, but still kind of that same vibe of we typically know who our heroes are. And usually the rule in any horror movie, whether it be slasher or, Possession or any part of horror, if the clothes come off, typically that's the end of your life at some point. And it's interesting enough in Night of the Demons, when one of the opening scenes is the innocent character that's going to be one of our final survivors, gets a partial nude scene. It's already kind of shocking. Like, this person's gonna survive the whole movie. This is what characters do when they're about to die. Yeah, our main character and our ultimate survivor, like our real heroine of this movie, has not only a nude scene, but a prolonged full frontal nude scene that apparently wasn't even scripted that way. Apparently when the writer saw the movie, he was like, Shaw. Because that's not how I wrote that at all. She's supposed to be wearing a towel. But what's crazy about that also is, like I said, not only have we just embraced crazy at this point, but the Shaw factor of, like, it kind of turns into a slasher movie a little bit in this scene with the way she's stalked around the locker room. It gives me a lot of vibes. Like, I really feel like Kevin Williamson and Rodriguez were inspired by this scene for the climax. The climatic nude scene in The Faculty feels very much inspired by this. And like I said, the fact that it's an iconic scene in itself, and a scene that you will never forget. But then the kill that punctuates this scene is, like, to me, one of the more memorable. That's something else we kind of seen. Like, there was that Olivia Wilde movie where Donald Glover got killed that way, where he was in a locker that just got squeezed. The Lazarus Effect, I think it was. But the way this captured it just feels totally like you can see where a lot of future horror directors were like, this is the inspiration. This is gonna make us create our own scenes that don't quite reach the power or the shock value of it. And you can. It's always interesting to see, because if there's one genre that's just really, really trope heavy, it's horror, and it's always fun. And it's always fun in any genre to go back, but especially in horror. To see where, like, some tropes might have originated, to see where exactly their origin was, because in horror they will always go, way, way back, all the way back to the silent era, and to see how they've been changed and repeated over time. And sometimes they make them their own, but a lot of other times it's like you never quite reach what the previous accomplished, where you can see where the inspiration jumped off. With that said, with some big memorable kill moments like this, we also have stuff like the computer death, where we have the blue electricity that comes out, and that's the way it fries him can be quite shocking. But like seeing the blue electricity, that's something that feels very quite dated in a way. Just to put, like, there's another way to go into that, but it just feels like the mild way to put it is it's dated. But there's something you won't see again until, like, a Puppet Master movie or something. Stuff that, to give it the benefit of the doubt, might be intentionally campy. But then, whether we have stuff that's completely dated or stuff that still really holds up, there's not quite anything like what we get in our climax here as far as stuff that holds up quite well, when we actually get this big moment where it's like we've seen great stuff throughout, and it's like, oh, that's a really cool effect that they accomplished and stuff like that. But even, and I don't even think this is an exaggeration or hyperbole, even today, I feel like it's extremely impressive and extremely wild. This scene at the end where it looks like we're kind of in the same position as we were at the beginning. And sure, we're probably going to be expecting some sort of Carrie-esque ending, which we do get. But before we get all the Carrie-esque stuff, we get this incredible scene. Like I said, even in today's movies, feels practically unmatched. When we see the main character, when we see Mary Lou emerge from our main character, where her body, her burned body, breaks through the human body, and it's like I said, even today that effect is fucking insane. And it's like it's one of my favorite scenes in horror, I think. And like I said, the fact that it's not as I threw iconic at stuff like the locker death and the locker room scene and stuff like that. I do think that it's very unfortunate that they aren't as iconic as they could be. Like as far as like, you know, the horror fan base, I imagine will know this movie quite well, and that's where you can say it has its iconic status. But as far as like the mainstream iconic status is a totally different thing, and that's something that I really wish this movie had. That it's really kind of surprising that it doesn't when you actually go back to it, and you see how really accomplished it is in a lot of these effects, and it's, you know, big moments and some of the more gruesome moments of it. And then of course, you know, eventually we'll get, you know, there's some more like dark humor in here, like the irony of the guy that keeps making exorcist jokes eventually gets his head twisted around, so there is that. So that dark sense of humor is constantly looming through this one, even in these moments when we're getting to the climax and shit's really getting real, and wild. It's always, I think that's something else that really, like I was comparing Mary Lou to Heather Chandler, and it's like it almost does kind of have this Heather's like sense of humor. I think there was one critic at the time that compared it to Blue Velvet, which is really wild. I don't know if that has to do with like like everything seeming perfect on the surface and then it's all fucked up underneath. If that's what they were going for, if they were going something like more specific, I don't know. But I feel like that says pretty much everything you need to know. That a possession movie called Prom Night 2 got at least one comparison to Blue Velvet of all things. But it really stands on its own. Like I said, you can say stuff like Carrie-esque and stuff like that, and it is, you know, the possession genre still. But there's so much in here that feels like its own thing, that I feel like a lot of horror directors kind of low-key took from, or maybe not so low-key took from. And I do think it's a movie that I wish was more well-known and more iconic in regards to the scenes like this, but like I said, I don't know if the title did it in or what, but it definitely needs a bigger reputation. Like I said, I'm pretty sure that reputation does exist when you're looking for those fans, but I feel like it should definitely be more well known. How good it is, and how well done it is. So going on that, we can come over to Night of the Demons, and what I really love about Night of the Demons just right away is like I was talking about, when you watch Hello Mary Lou, it kind of dawns on you as you're watching it, where it's like, oh, this might be better than I thought it was going to be, or it's like, wow, this is actually well written, and like the effects are really well done. These set pieces are really well done. Night of the Demons kind of grabs me in a very specific way immediately, like with its opening title sequence alone, and then these opening scenes where we meet the characters. Because there's this, I feel like Night of the Demons in particular is part of this small area of quintessential classic Halloween feel kind of movies, where it's like it's always given me the vibe of Night of the Demons is basically the hocus pocus of R-rated horror, where it's like if you really just like, it's, you know, this time of year and you're around and like it's turning into fall and you see everybody's like Halloween decorations and like all the, you know, costume shops are open and all that stuff, and it's like you just get this craving for this movie that just really has that Halloween feel to it in particular, not just, you know, the horror vibe, but I mean the Halloween vibe specifically, like the holiday specifically. And like I said, it feels like on two different spectrums. For that title, there's Hocus Pocus and there's Night of the Demons. And as we see, you know, these characters headed towards this one big party, and we meet all of them. Some of them, most of them are going to be our major characters. Some of them are characters that are only set up for payoffs, like the old man. But this is probably one of the better examples ever of setup and payoff, of setting up this whole Halloween legend of putting razors in apples and handing them out, and this very bitter, crazed old man that's going to supposedly do that. And then you kind of just completely forget of his existence because we never see him again in the entire movie until the payoff comes, which is the very last scene of the movie right before the credits roll, which is kind of ingenious. That whole bookend, which I love. The bookend is kind of a very underused way to use setup and payoff. Because it's like, I feel like a lot of people are afraid audiences have short-term memories, so they'll like forget what that was, what the setup even was. But this one's not afraid of that, which is great, and has one of the best payoffs ever. And certainly one of like the best, more memorable endings to a horror movie ever. Like I said, completely fitting the whole Halloween tone, which is great. We also have Linnea Quigley in here, who is one of the like sort of unsung queens of the genre. Once again, separating people who are really, really into horror that know exactly who she is. And then there's the mainstream effect, where it's like, I feel like nobody knows who she is as far as mainstream goes, which sucks because she's such a face of the genre. Just with this and Return of the Living Dead alone, she pretty much accomplished that. But we also meet our memorable characters like Angie, who's eventually going to basically be our antagonist, who kind of feels like our main antagonist too, is the face of the movie in another sense. Like I was talking about when I was talking about Candyman, what I love about these Scream Factory Blu-rays is having the new covers, which are great, but then also on the other side being the original covers, of which the possessed Angie was the face of this movie. But obviously we're going to get plenty of memorable imagery on top of that after our characters are completely converged. But like I said, some of the intros here are throwing us off in interesting ways, where we have, like I said, we have two different intros to two different characters who are on two totally different sides of will they survive this movie or not. Will one be the hero and will one be the one that we know is going to die at some point? In that sort of, I guess you could almost say, exploitive way they're introduced. The old, like I said, the old horror trope of the more you show your body, the more likely you probably are to die. So the whole idea of Quigley using her body to help Angie shoplift in this really fantastic theatrical way is one of those characters, like the very first shot of her is her ass directly in the camera. And it's like, that's the kind of thing where if you know horror movie tropes, you're like, this is probably a person whose hours are limited, if not minutes. But like I said, the fact that we also get that from... And like I said, I love the fact that Quigley's always sort of playing with that trope of using nudity in this clever way, which is obviously one of the tropes in horror that's the most easy to do, because it's like, oh, here's what the audience wants, because it's mostly, you know, teenage dudes or whatever. But just, like, one of my favorite... I said this when I talked about it a couple years ago, but one of my favorite jokes, maybe ever, is when Quigley does her famous strip scene in Return of the Living Dead, and she is totally and completely naked, and then when she has to run for cover when the zombies start coming, she puts a vest on, and that's it. It's like, that is like one of my favorite jokes in any movie ever. Comedy, horror, it doesn't matter. And the fact that she embraces that again here, like I said, there's that opening shot, and then there is also a quite famous scene in this movie. This movie was recommended to me by a friend, and the way she built it up to me was she said, there is a tube of lipstick in this movie, and you will never guess what happens to it. And I have to confess, I had no idea that's where that was headed. I never in a million years would have guessed that. And that's the kind of vibe you want to go into with a horror movie, is coming out of it with scenes where it's like I said, if you know the possession genre, you feel like you know it in and out, and you've seen all the other movies, and it's like, yeah, we get the possession thing. But then sometimes a movie might come along that has you saying things like, I would have never ever guessed that was going to happen. And that's the magic of this movie. I feel like there's a few moments like that where it just completely catches you off guard. Whether it be, you know, something like that, or whether it be a moment of gore, or whether it be Donnie Jeffcoat jumping out of a closet and saying, bodacious booby sis. I don't know if anybody I don't know if anybody is my age or grew up with like 90s Nickelodeon and remembers Wild and Crazy Kids. Yeah, I'm talking about that Donnie Jeff. Jumps out of a closet and says that. And that is the introduction to our main character, who's basically our main character. And this is another one like Hello Mary Lou was kind of doing, where it introduces characters, and you think you kind of know where these characters are going to go. Like I said, the opening nude scene from the main character might make you think that as well. But what's interesting here is we have the guy, the douchebag guy that's going after her, that she was with at one point. And then she has the new guy that kind of, dresses better and, meets her family and all that. And you immediately get the sense that one of these guys is obviously better than the other, and the other might be more antagonistic or more of a douchebag, and one of the guys you're just waiting to die. Sal, in this case, is the guy that we probably think we're just going to be waiting to die. He takes the little brother's mask, he acts like a douche and kind of sleazy. But then, when we start getting bad vibes from the new guy, we realize that Sal was the better option, apparently. Apparently neither of them are, but the fact that Sal was the better option might be a bigger twist than any horror-related twist this movie could have had, to where his death is actually quite tragic. After he was set up as, oh, he's just one of these guys we're going to wait to die. And it's like I said, the way these movies can use characters in unexpected ways is something that goes by a lot of horror writers, it seems. But this one does that quite well. And then we also have Raj, who is the character, who's basically like the audience surrogate. He's the guy where as soon as anything suspicious starts going down or anything like, hey, let's do this, let's potentially summon a demon or something, he's the guy that's looking away and saying, no, I'm actually just going to leave. And sure enough, he just leaves the house. That's like the first thing he does. Only trouble being that we're completely blocked off by a brick wall now, because supernatural stuff. But talking about the summoning of this demon, that's great. First off, there is something here that could have easily failed, and that is seeing the demon's face. But no, I gotta be honest. Maybe it might seem cheesy now. I don't know, but I don't know. That demon's face still freaks me the fuck out. Like if I saw that in a mirror at night the way they do, I would just shit myself and then die on the spot. I wouldn't have to worry about getting possessed. I would just die on the spot. But I love the way they do this scene, where not only do we get the shattered mirror and that really great shot of all the characters with the glass on the ground, which is just an incredible shot. Like, it's one of those things also where it's like, it's so incredible you would not expect it from this kind of movie. The whole movie is very well shot, actually. And while a lot of it is like, in the dark and it's a lot of hallways, which you might expect, or dark rooms, the camera movement is like off the charts in this. I love the idea of us getting like so many point of view shots from the demon himself, like especially when he's like scoping out the room and he's like right up in their faces practically, and it's like he's almost like he's choosing a body, and we're watching this from the demon's perspective. It is really wild. And that's another thing also where it's almost like it could take the scare factor out of it, but it's actually like a lot scarier, where like you constantly have this sense that there's something else in the room with them because of how, like, the closer the camera gets to them. And then when the possessions start happening, and then just all shit breaks loose, and that's where we get all of our really fun gore. And like I said, we get stuff that's completely out of left field, like the lipstick scene, but we really appreciate the stuff that's like totally out of left field, because they could have just gone, regular deaths or whatever, and just characters kind of killing the other after they're possessed. But the way they handle like the use of the coffin as a death and slamming it down repeatedly, and the way they build up some of the terror also, where we get a lot of build up of Quigley before we even start to get her payoffs, where the character it just gets creepier and creepier as it goes. When she starts, she goes dying loud and wild at heart and just puts the lipstick all over her. And in like that moment, when we just when she's pursuing one of the main characters, and we just see her shadow on the wall for a while, she's pursuing without even moving, which already has like this sort of supernatural vibe to it, without really anything even needing to be done. And then, of course, you know, the reveals that we're in, like, a funeral home and a crematorium and stuff like that. And how it gets it finds ways to get increasingly creepier as it goes, based on the location. Like, even with stuff not even necessarily just the stuff that's happening, but just the more that's revealed about where we're trapped and how we're trapped, like, is when the horror really starts to build. And like I said, it's like you're getting chased by an unseen force, which is basically exactly what's going on here, which is really great. But yeah, also as we saw with Angie and some of the others, the makeup also really stands out. I do think it's hilarious that apparently the person that made the prosthetic tits for Quigley is actually the dude that ended up marrying her shortly after this, which is just one of those really fun behind the scenes stories that goes with the horror genre in general. Like, it feels like there's a lot of, you know, like, lore as far as, like, productions of horror movies. Then some of them feel like kind of bullshit. But then there's just the stuff like that that's completely unrelated to, oh, something scary happened on set, which is great. Which might be the anecdotes I prefer, but because you hear all the stuff about, like, you know, all this creepy stuff happened on The Exorcist, and it's like, a lot of that's probably exaggerated. You are making a horror movie. You were probably some things are probably going to be on edge anyway, and they might seem creepier than they actually are. But stuff like that. I feel like this one has, like, a lot of anecdotes to it that are really worth looking up. Um, and I was talking about how Hello Mary Lou has the moment where you kind of get the halfway mark where you can tell where its descent into crazy kind of starts. And I feel like we especially get that in this one with the dance scene, where apparently the actress that plays Angie, like, choreographed herself. And, like, yeah, just the more that goes, like, it feels like it goes on and on and on. It's like, it feels like this sort of descent into craziness as it goes on. And then from there on, everything is just, like I said, we've seen some shit at this point. We've seen the demon's face and everything up to this point. But there's something about the dance scene where it feels like we're crossing this sort of border into this sort of fucked up, hellish afterlife of sorts that this demon resides in, and now that's where we're trapped. And that's an exhilarating feeling with movies like this. And yeah, and then that's pretty much we get about what we get the gore, and then we get our climax. And sometimes climaxes like this can be sort of like, yeah, like, it usually takes some sort of exorcism or something like that, or some sort of just do this one thing and then you can get out. But I love that it's literally just getting away from them. Like, that's all you can do, is just jump over the wall and hope that you make it. And then when the sun rises, then we're good to go. And I love that it's not that elaborate at all, and they didn't overcomplicate it at all. This is something this movie really accomplishes, is it doesn't do anything at all to overcomplicate itself. It is exactly what it sets out to be. And like I said, ultimately ending on our final payoff with the razors is just incredible. I also loved, I always love the idea when the zombies are all coming out, or when all the possessed people are coming out at the last minute. They resemble zombies. And Max, the one that was dressed as the doctor, apparently at some point put his shirt back on after he was possessed. I like the idea that, particular, I mean, I suppose they're zombies at this point. We can call them that, can't we? I know some people in horror tend to be sticklers about terminology, but yeah, I like the idea of a zombie being almost self-conscious about his body, so he'll put his shirt back on before he stalks you. But yeah, and then, like I said, the way the descent where we see, I love that the main character is dressed like Alice from Alice in Wonderland, and how the more the movie goes on, the more appropriate that becomes. And then just reaching a very simple conclusion. Like, sometimes that's all a horror movie needs to be. And like I said, as far as, like, being this really Halloween-themed movie and feeling like a quintessential Halloween feel, like, it's, like, as far as, like, you know, picking one of these two, like I was saying, Hello Mary Lou is very, very well done, and should be much more well-known than it is, and much more well-regarded than it is, and should have a significantly better physical release. But as far as, like, accomplishing every single thing you set out to do, and doing it with the best possible outcome it could have had for what your intentions were, I feel like Night of the Demons is just everything that it should be. So I think I might prefer it based on that. Somebody could maybe say Hello Mary Lou is, like, objectively better as far as, like, you know, acting and production and all that. But the production on this is very, very impressive also, whether it be the makeup or the production design of the house. Um, so yeah, I think just in general, my preference might land on Night of the Demons, but like I said, a lot of that also is just how it really just captures the feel of Halloween in this way, that where a lot of horror movies are just kind of horror movies, but to have like an actual Halloween movie feels great. So I think that's pretty much where I can leave this. So the next, we've got a few other things coming as far as like versus goes, and then a few other things, some franchises and a couple of TV things, and a couple more new releases, and then we should be done with October, I think, and our awards video. So yeah, so until whatever the next thing is, I think that's it.